Time bent with weight. When my paws touched the earth, hardened by cold, I felt a world in suspension. It wasn't the silence of peace, but of waiting. Russia was living its final days as an empire. Winter covered streets and rooftops, and also ancient certainties. For centuries, the Romanovs ruled as God's chosen. The Tsar was anointed before icons and altars, as intermediary between heaven and earth. To question him was to question the very order of the universe. But no idea survives when hunger begins to speak louder. The First World War had drained everything. At the fronts, trenches of blood. In the cities, lines for bread and cold houses. Soldiers deserted, workers stopped. Faith in the throne cracked, not from political theory, but from exhaustion before daily misery. I watched starving crowds passing intact palaces. The contrast was unsustainable. Power trusts too much in symbols. But when the body feels hunger, crowns and heraldry lose their shine quickly. Divine authority had no answer to scarcity. Nicholas II was not a monster. He was a man out of his time. He trusted in tradition, in continuity, in divine protection. But governing demands adaptation, and Russia was changing too fast for an emperor trapped in the previous century. There I understood that I would not simply witness the end of a family. I would witness the death of an idea. That power is born of the divine, is untouchable and above human judgment. The abdication did not come with epic drama. In March of 1917, in a train stopped near Pskov, Nicholas signed a simple document. No speech, no ceremony. In a few lines, 300 years of Romanov came to an end. The empire collapsed from within. Divine authority evaporated overnight. What remained was a man, his wife, and his children, now prisoners of a country that no longer saw sanctity in them. The faith that surrounded them had turned to resentment. The sacred had become oppressive. The family was pushed from residence to residence, each time more isolated. Guards changed, orders shifted. The new power didn't know what to do with them. Killing was risky, releasing them, impossible. Keeping them alive, a constant danger. I watched Alexandra, the Tsarina, clinging to faith. Prayers, icons, promises. For her, everything was divine trial. For the new regime, it was just a political problem that needed to disappear from public attention. The children understood nothing. All they saw was a life shrinking. Less space, less freedom, more watching eyes. Their childhood was swallowed by decisions made far from any guarded room. Meanwhile, Russia was tearing itself apart in civil war. Armies emerged, fronts drew closer, and in the middle of this board, the old imperial family became a symbol too dangerous to continue existing. Yekaterinburg was the perfect place to make someone disappear. Remote, industrial, under Bolshevik control. The Ipatiev house, the house of special purpose, became a prison. High walls, sealed windows, constant surveillance. Pomp was gone. Only confinement remained. Nicholas kept diaries. He noted short walks, readings, prayers, the time of day. It was a way to hold on to a bit of normalcy while everything else crumbled. Writing was his last gesture of control. The guards oscillated between rudeness and indifference. Little devotion, little hatred. For most, that family was no longer sacred nor diabolic. It was an administrative problem amid war. The counter-revolutionary front advanced. If the Romanovs were freed, they could become a living banner against the Bolsheviks. If they were killed, that risk disappeared. The equation was simple and brutal. Time accelerated. When revolutions feel threatened, extreme decisions appear quickly. The discussion ceased to be moral and became a question of the new regime's survival. In practice, the sentence already existed. All that remained was choosing the night in which it would stop being an idea and become action. On the night of July 16th to 17th, 1918, the order came. No speeches, no proclamations. The family would descend to the basement of the Ipatiev house, supposedly for safety. It seemed routine. It was the end. The basement was cramped, suffocating, poorly lit. Nothing of thrones, nothing of icons. Only bare walls and hard floor, a place created to contain, not to crown. There, the old anointed would be treated like any target. When the shots began, there was no trial, no final word. Only disorderly gunfire, echoes and narrow walls, screams and confused orders. Divine authority died there, in the dry noise of weapons, far from altars and processions. Jewels sewn into clothes, deflected bullets, and prolonged the horror. Bayonets had to be used as well. Nothing in that scene resembled clean justice. It resembled fear, haste, and the will to erase a symbol once and for all. Then came functional silence. Bodies taken in haste, marks covered as if nothing had happened there. The immediate problem was solved. The echo of the act, not. The Romanov dynasty ended there. In blood and idea. The myth of power anointed by God was ended in the most direct way possible. A nervous squad in an improvised basement. The news did not emerge as a solemn official announcement. It came in rumors, vague notes, contradictory versions. The regime avoided details. The silence was not respect. It was strategy. Avoid martyrs. Avoid scandal. Avoid giving the old throne one last act of grandeur. When the world understood what had happened, the shock was immense. It wasn't just the death of a czar. It was the message. If even the anointed could be executed in secret, no throne was safe. The 20th century would advance under that shadow. Monarchies would fall. Empires would disappear. Crowns would learn to coexist with parliaments and revolutions. Divine authority would never again seem indisputable. But the execution brought no order. Civil war continued violent. Hunger, persecutions, battles. Killing the Romanovs didn't organize the chaos. History rarely delivers simple solutions in exchange for a single gesture. What changed was the declared source of legitimacy. Instead of heaven, ideologies, parties, armies, and propaganda. Where once a blessing was enough, now programs, congresses, and information control were necessary. The world was entering a phase less ritual and more brutal, less sacred, more pragmatic. The throne had lost its aura. Whoever commanded from then on would have to sustain themselves on force, narrative, and results, not on miracles. Rumors emerged quickly. Hidden survivors, secret heirs, failed rescues. When power kills symbols, it creates ghosts difficult to control. The void left by an anointed figure rarely remains empty. These myths were not born of naivety. They were born from the refusal to accept that the sacred could disappear like any political enemy. It was easier to believe in a lost Grand Duchess than to face what really happened. For decades, imposters emerged claiming Romanov identities. Women saying they were daughters who escaped. Men claiming to be miraculous heirs. All filling the symbolic void left by the fall of consecrated authority. The absence of a public body, of funeral, of final ritual fed these narratives. Official silence gave space to popular imagination. When the state hides too much, society invents what's missing. Modern power learned there that controlling the narrative is as important as controlling weapons. It's not enough to act. You must tell the story before others do. Every gap becomes an invitation for political ghosts. But even rigid narratives don't erase the symbolic weight of such an event. The execution of the Romanovs continued resurging in films, books, and memories, reminding us that the anointed can be disposable. After the Romanovs, no ruler could claim sanctity without suspicion. The image of the Tsar, dead in secret, hovered as a shadow over every remaining throne. The world had shifted its axis, even if many pretended not to notice. Power became terrestrial, negotiable, contestable, not by generous choice, but by necessity. Politics, and no longer the altar, began to justify command. Parliament, party, plebiscite, and bayonet competed for the space of crowns and incense. Ideologies occupied the place of crowns. Where once eternal salvation was promised, earthly redemption and terrestrial paradises began to be promised. But the mechanism of control remained: loyalty in exchange for security and meaning. The 20th century would be marked by leaders promising secular redemption with the same conviction as ancient divine kings. Personality cults, parades, flags replaced icons and relics. Prayers became slogans. The difference was aesthetic. Instead of crowns, flags. Instead of pulpits, platforms. Instead of blessings, speeches. The internal logic remained: centralized decision, demand obedience, declare yourself indispensable. I observed, knowing that divine authority had died on that early morning. But humanity's thirst for absolute authority remained alive, merely waiting for new symbols to wear. I walked out of Yekaterinburg with the feeling of having witnessed something that doesn't end the moment it happens. The execution of the Romanovs didn't end that night. It continued reverberating through the coming century, shaping fears and discourses of power that still repeat today. Snow continued falling, covering streets and recent traces, as if the world tried to erase evidence. Nature doesn't react to the fall of empires, it simply continues. And that indifference is the cruelest reminder that no human power occupies a central place in the flow of time. The world didn't stop that early morning, but something changed irreversibly. After that point, governing would never mean the same thing. The idea of absolute power, anointed and untouchable, had been broken, even if many refused to admit it. Divine authority officially disappeared, but humanity's desire for total control remained intact. It merely changed discourse, symbols, and justifications. Where once there were crowns and prayers, ideologies, parties, and promises of absolute future would emerge. The internal mechanism stayed the same. Only the language changed uniforms. History doesn't learn from its own records. It merely accumulates them. Each generation believes it is different, more conscious, more prepared, but it repeats the same cycles when it clings to the certainty that its form of power is definitive, morally superior, or immune to the collapse that destroyed all the previous ones. I observe because remembering is the only form of resistance that time allows, not to prevent repetition, that rarely happens, but to recognize the signs when they emerge again. Every absolute certainty ends the same way, and the silence that remains afterward is always louder than any discourse. If you want to continue traveling with me through moments when the world shifted its axis, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. Time guard stories that many prefer to forget, but that always return with new flags and new promises. I will be there to observe them with you. Until the next episode,